What if the most powerful football club in history was never just about football? From the outside, Real Madrid looks like the definition of greatness. The white shirts, the glittering trophies, the legendary players who became icons for generations. Fans call it La Casa Blanca, the White House of football, a fortress of glory that has lifted more Champions League titles than any other. But behind the shine of the silverware, there is another story. A story where politics, power, and ambition collide. A story where victories were not only celebrated on the pitch, but also used to project an image to the world. Real Madrid is not only a football club, it is a symbol. For some, it embodies excellence, pride, and the eternal pursuit of victory. For others, it represents controversy, privilege, and shadows of influence that go far beyond the game. That tension between admiration and suspicion is what makes this story so fascinating. Because Real Madrid's rise to become the kings of Europe did not happen by accident. Go back to the turbulent Spain of the 20th century. Civil war, dictatorship, social divisions. The country was a battlefield of ideologies. And in the middle of it, football became something much bigger than a sport. For millions, it was escape. For the powerful, it was a weapon. The stadium was not just a place of goals and celebrations. It was a stage where politics could be disguised as entertainment and victories could be turned into propaganda. And no club carried this role more visibly than Real Madrid. Think about it. While other teams struggled to survive under the weight of crisis, Real Madrid began building its empire. Legends like Alfredo Di Stéfano were not simply players. They were symbols of dominance, recruited in controversial ways that still spark debate today. Titles came one after another, 5 European Cups in a row, as if destiny itself had chosen Madrid to rule. But destiny in football is often guided by unseen hands. Was it pure sporting excellence? Or was it something else? An alignment of power, politics, and opportunity? To understand Real Madrid is to understand the duality of football itself. On one side, passion, artistry, unforgettable nights under the lights of the Bernabeu. On the other, strategy, control, and influence that reaches far beyond the pitch. That's why every fan has their own opinion. For some, Madrid is the greatest club ever to exist, the symbol of football's highest standard. For others, it is a reminder that football has always been entangled with forces much larger than the game. And yet, here lies the paradox that keeps people watching. Even when you question the shadows, you cannot deny the brilliance. Even when you doubt the purity of the victories, you cannot ignore the sheer dominance. Real Madrid evokes admiration and suspicion in equal measure. And that is exactly what makes this journey irresistible, because this is not a fairy tale of trophies and heroes. It is a drama, a story where glory comes with a cost, where every triumph hides whispers of privilege, and where the line between sport and politics is impossible to ignore. It is the story of how Real Madrid, through decades of crisis and conquest, became the eternal kings of European football. But to see how this empire was forged, you have to go back to a Spain torn apart and a leader who understood the power of the game better than anyone else. Before we move forward into this journey, let me ask you something. When you hear the name Real Madrid, what do you really feel? Is it admiration for the club that has defined greatness, or suspicion that behind every trophy there might be a hidden story? That tension between pride and doubt, glory and controversy is exactly what makes this story so unique, and that's why your voice matters here. If this story resonates with you, even just a little, take a second to hit that like button. It might seem small, but every click tells us this is the kind of history you want uncovered, the kind of truth you want told, and I want to hear from you directly. Comment below, have you ever felt that football is more than just a game? That it's a mirror of politics, power, and society itself? Your perspective doesn't just add to the conversation, it shapes it. Every comment becomes part of this community that refuses to see football only as numbers and goals, but as something much deeper. And of course, if you haven't yet, subscribe. Not just to follow a channel, but but to stay part of a space where football is more than highlights. It's history, it's drama, it's the raw emotion that connects us across generations. Here, you're not just watching. You're joining a movement of fans who want to see the beautiful game for what it really is. Powerful, dramatic, and sometimes even dark. Because what comes next in this story will take us into the heart of a country torn by war. And a leader who used Real Madrid as more than a club. He used it as a weapon. And once you see how it began, you'll never look at this team the same way again. Under the shadow of war, football stopped being just football. Spain in the 1930s was a country divided, torn apart by the Spanish Civil War, and yet even in the chaos of bombs and barricades, the name Real Madrid began to carry a meaning that stretched far beyond the pitch. Imagine living in Madrid at that time. Streets echoing with fear, families split by ideology, and a club caught in the middle of it all. For many, stepping into a stadium was not about watching a match. It was about survival, identity, and sometimes even propaganda. When Franco's forces rose to power, Real Madrid became something more than 11 men chasing a ball. The club, whether it wanted to or not, was pulled into the machinery of politics. It's easy to forget that football clubs are not islands. They live and breathe within their country's histories. And in Franco's Spain, that meant every goal, every victory, every European night could be turned into a statement. Real Madrid wasn't simply winning matches. It was being portrayed as proof of national strength, a shining symbol Franco used to show the world that Spain was powerful, disciplined, and capable of greatness. But here's the question nobody asks out loud. Was this alliance a choice, or was it survival? Did Real Madrid embrace the political influence willingly, or was it trapped, forced to play along in order to keep its players safe, its fans together, and its existence intact? That tension is what makes this chapter of their history so unsettling. Football historians often debate this point, and the truth is, the line is blurred. What we know is that Franco understood the global appeal of football and weaponized it. And Real Madrid, with its growing reputation, became the perfect tool. Imagine being Alfredo Di Stéfano, the man who would go on to define the identity of Real Madrid, yet arriving in a Spain where every step on the pitch carried weight far beyond sport. Was he just a footballer, or did he unknowingly become a pawn in a much larger narrative? When Madrid lifted its first European Cups, millions of Spaniards celebrated, but in the background, Franco's government celebrated even louder. For them, each trophy was political capital, each win a headline that screamed not just about football, but about the supposed strength of a regime that ruled with iron fists. And still there was another side to this story. For fans in the stands, for the ordinary people who wore the white shirt, Real Madrid wasn't Franco's club. It was their escape. It was the 90 minutes where reality could be forgotten, where the roar of the crowd drowned out the silence of censorship, where they could feel united by something larger than politics. That's the paradox. A club used as a political weapon, but also a sanctuary for those who longed for freedom, joy, and pride. It's a contradiction that still haunts Real Madrid's legacy today. Some will tell you that Franco favored Madrid over Barcelona, fueling the eternal rivalry we now call El Clásico. Others argue that's an oversimplification, that politics merely amplified an already deep sporting clash. But think about it. What better narrative for Franco's Spain than Madrid, the capital's club, crushing Catalonia's pride on the field? Every Clásico was more than just football. It was Madrid versus Barcelona, yes, but also dictatorship versus resistance, power versus rebellion. And the scars of that era still bleed into every encounter today. This is where football turns into theater, where every pass and every goal tells a story that textbooks alone cannot capture. For Madrid, dominance in Europe came hand in hand with this controversial image, worshipped by millions, criticized by others, but never ignored. And for Barcelona, each defeat was more than a loss on the pitch. It was a symbol of their struggle for identity against a central power that tried to silence them. And here's where I want to bring you into the story. After everything you've just heard, after picturing a stadium filled with hope and propaganda all at once, I want you to write a single word in the comments, shadow, because that's exactly what this period was, a shadow that followed Real Madrid, shaping its victories, defining its rivalries, and ensuring that every time we say Kings of Europe, there's an echo reminding us of the darker foundations beneath the glory. And as we move forward, the story only grows more complex. Because the Franco era was just the beginning of how Real Madrid became more than a club, more than a team. It became a symbol, sometimes loved, sometimes hated, but always powerful. And the next chapter will reveal how those shadows gave birth to one of the most unstoppable dynasties football has ever seen. Power. That was the word that defined Spain in the 1950s, and it was also the word that defined Real Madrid. Out of the ashes of civil war and dictatorship, something unexpected happened. A football club became the face of a nation desperate to show itself as strong and modern. Europe was still rebuilding, nations were trying to reclaim dignity after World War II, and suddenly football turned into a stage for reputations. For Franco's Spain, Real Madrid became the golden mask covering a darker reality. This is where the figure of Alfredo Di Stéfano enters the story, not just as a player, but as a revolution. When he stepped onto the pitch in 1953, Madrid wasn't just signing a footballer, they were signing destiny. Di Stéfano was everywhere, striker, midfielder, defender, conductor of the game. He didn't just play football, he transformed it. His arrival didn't simply make Real Madrid stronger. It created an identity. White shirts weren't just white shirts anymore. They became a symbol of dominance, of elegance, of inevitability. And in a Europe recovering from wounds, this image was magnetic. The European Cup was born in 1955, and Madrid immediately understood its meaning. To win domestically was one thing. To conquer Europe was another. And while other nations sent their best, Real Madrid stepped into this new arena like they were destined to own it. Imagine those nights in the Parc des Princes, in the San Siro in Hampton Park, stadiums filled with the echo of a new era. The world was beginning to whisper a name with reverence, Real Madrid. But here's the part that makes this moment so unforgettable. They didn't just win one European Cup, they won 5 in a row. 5 consecutive seasons where Real Madrid were untouchable, lifting the trophy as if it was made for them and them alone. Think about the psychological impact of that. In the time when television was just beginning to broadcast football into homes, every image of Di Stéfano scoring, of Gento sprinting down the wing, of Puskás unleashing his cannon left foot, was burned into the collective imagination of millions. Madrid wasn't just dominating football. They were shaping how football itself was seen, sold and loved across the world, and with every victory, Franco's Spain stood taller in the eyes of the international community. The dictatorship pointed at Madrid's triumphs and said, "Look, we are not a broken nation. Look at our champions. Look at our strength." Each European Cup was transformed into a political medal, but for the fans in the terraces, it was something much simpler and yet far more powerful: pride. For many Spaniards, these victories gave them joy in lives where joy was scarce. A night of football became a night of escape, and for a few hours, dictatorship didn't matter. Still, shadows lingered. Barcelona supporters, Catalans who had suffered under Franco's repression, watched Madrid's rise with bitterness. Each trophy felt like salt on open wounds, proof that their identity was being overshadowed. The rivalry grew deeper, more personal, more emotional. For them, every Real Madrid victory was not just a defeat, it was humiliation. And this tension fueled El Clásico into something bigger than sport. It became a battlefield for memory, for resistance, for pride. As Real Madrid conquered Europe again and again, the club's name started to transcend borders. Newspapers in Italy, France, and England didn't just cover the matches. They marveled at the style, the consistency, the aura. The phrase "Kings of Europe" was born in this era, and once it was said, it could never be unsaid. That title would cling to Madrid forever, shaping every expectation, every generation, every comparison that followed. This wasn't simply the rise of a great football team. It was the creation of a dynasty, a myth, a standard by which all others would be measured. And as the trophies piled up, so did the questions. How much of this glory belonged to the genius of players like Stéfano and Puskas? And how much was a narrative crafted by power, politics, and propaganda? It's a question that still divides historians, still fuels late-night debates in bars, still lingers in the identity of Real Madrid itself. Now imagine being a young fan in the 1960s, hearing your grandfather tell you about Di Stefano's brilliance, about Puskas' legendary goals, about the unstoppable machine that was Real Madrid. Those stories weren't just football, they were myths passed down like folklore, giving Madrid a supernatural aura. And even today, when we look back, we don't see just matches or scores. We see the birth of the White Empire, forged in a time of shadows, but glowing so brightly it blinded the world. And yet, what happens to an empire when the golden age begins to fade? What happens when dominance is challenged, when cracks start to show, when the unbeatable finally bleed? That is the question waiting just beyond this chapter. A decline. It's a word that Real Madrid fans once thought they would never hear. After half a decade of absolute dominance, after lifting 5 consecutive European Cups, the invincibility began to crack. Football, like history, never stays still. And as the 1960s unfolded, Real Madrid began to face something it had not known for years: vulnerability. The dynasty of Di Stefano was fading. Time is merciless, even for legends. His brilliance, once untouchable, began to dim as age, and the natural cycle of the game caught up with him. Ferenc Puskas, though still a genius, no longer carried the same devastating edge. And while Madrid's white shirts still carried the aura of greatness, on the pitch, opponents no longer trembled, they prepared. The kings of Europe were beginning to look human. Other clubs sensed blood in the water. Inter Milan rose with the iron discipline of Helenio Herrera's Grande Inter, a team of tactical innovation and relentless organization. Benfica, powered by the unstoppable Eusebio, took Europe by storm, showing that Portuguese football could also shine. Manchester United, led by the visionary Sir Matt Busby and inspired by George Best, Bobby Charlton and Denis Law, brought England to the European stage with style and swagger. Suddenly, Madrid was no longer the only empire in the spotlight. They were one among many. The defeats cut deep. Every loss in Europe felt heavier because of what it symbolized: the fall from Olympus. In 1962, Benfica dethroned Madrid in the European Cup final. In 1964, Inter humiliated them with a ruthless display. By 1966, though Madrid managed to lift one last European Cup with the so-called Yeye team, the aura of inevitability was gone. They were still giants, but giants under siege, and while the cracks were visible on the pitch, outside it the shadows of politics never left. Franco's regime still celebrated Madrid's victories as symbols of Spanish power, but the defeats were harder to explain. How could the chosen symbol of the nation fall to Italians, Portuguese, or English rivals? The political narrative struggled, but for fans, the story was simpler. Football had become more competitive, and Madrid's golden age had ended domestically. Barcelona and Atletico Madrid fought to break Real's dominance in Spain. El Clásico carried even more weight in this era, because every Madrid slip-up was celebrated by those who saw the club not only as a football rival, but as a political instrument. For Catalans, each Barcelona goal against Real Madrid felt like a small act of rebellion, a whisper of defiance against Franco's Spain. And so Madrid entered the 1970s with uncertainty. They still had money, they still had prestige, and they still had the Santiago Bernabeu as their fortress. But in Europe, the crown was slipping. Ajax, with Johan Cruyff and the philosophy of total football, dazzled the world with a style of play that made Madrid look old-fashioned. Bayern Munich, with Gerd Müller and Franz Beckenbauer, imposed German efficiency and strength. And Liverpool, the rising force from England, began its march toward continental glory. Real Madrid was no longer the automatic answer to the question, who rules Europe? They had become part of the competition, no longer the competition itself. The myth remained, but the reality was harsher. The empire built by Stéfano was now a memory, and the world was moving forward without waiting for Madrid to catch up. But here lies the paradox. Even in decline, Real Madrid was never irrelevant. Their name alone carried weight, their presence in Europe always dangerous. And that's the curse of being a legend. You are expected to dominate forever. But when you stumble, the world notices twice as much. As the 1970s marched on, the question wasn't whether Madrid would rise again, but how. Would they adapt to the new world of football, or would they remain a fading giant, remembered only for past glories? The answer would come, but not without pain, not without crisis, and not without a new generation ready to carry the torch. And when that generation arrived, they would be called La Quinta del Buitre. In the 1980s, as Madrid searched for identity, a new generation emerged from within. They were not expensive foreigners nor political symbols. They were homegrown talents. They were La Quinta del Buitre, 5 young men who carried the white shirt with hunger and defiance: Butragueño, Sanchis, Michel, Martín Vázquez, and Pardeza. At their center was Emilio Butragueño, El Buitre, whose vision and intelligence became the emblem of this rebirth. Domestically, they conquered Spain with style and authority, winning 5 consecutive league titles from 1986 to 1990. Their play was fast, elegant, and distinctly Spanish. Yet in Europe, the ghost still haunted them. Defeats against Milan and others kept Madrid away from reclaiming the European throne. They ruled La Liga, but outside Spain, they remained vulnerable. Still, La Quinta restored pride, passion, and a sense of identity. For the fans, these weren't just players. They were Madridistas by blood. They proved that even in times of uncertainty, the club could reinvent itself through its own soul. The new millennium brought a revolution. Florentino Perez promised a Real Madrid unlike anything the world had seen. His vision was simple yet audacious: assemble the greatest stars on the planet under one crest. Thus, the Galacticos were born. Luis Figo's controversial transfer from Barcelona in 2000 was the spark. Soon after came Zidane, Ronaldo, Beckham, names that transcended football itself. On the pitch, they dazzled. Zidane's volley in the 2002 Champions League final remains one of the most iconic goals ever scored. Madrid became a global brand, filling stadiums and headlines across the world. Yet behind the glamour lurked fragility. Domestic inconsistency, egos, and defensive weaknesses showed the cracks. By chasing brilliance, balance was sacrificed. Still, the Galacticos reshaped football forever. They turned Real Madrid into not just a team, but a spectacle. For fans, it was a golden dream, even if it sometimes burned too brightly. After the shine of the Galacticos, shadows returned. Between 2004 and 2010, Real Madrid faced turbulence that tested its very identity. Despite stars on the field, trophies grew scarce. Barcelona, led by Ronaldinho and later Messi, dominated Spain and Europe, leaving Madrid wounded. The Santiago Bernabeu witnessed frustration as managers came and went, none able to restore balance. Yet even in crisis, Madrid refused to surrender. They invested heavily, signing young talents like Sergio Ramos and established figures like Kaká and Cristiano Ronaldo in 2009. The rebuild was ambitious, signaling that defeat was only temporary. Though results in Europe remained disappointing, a new foundation was being laid. Behind the losses, resilience was forming. Real Madrid was preparing for a new dynasty, one that would soon shake the entire continent. In 2009, the arrival of Cristiano Ronaldo marked the dawn of a new empire. With unmatched ambition and relentless hunger, he became the embodiment of Real Madrid's spirit. Alongside stars like Sergio Ramos, Modric, Bale, and later Kroos, a new dynasty was forged. Under Zinedine Zidane's guidance, history was rewritten. 4 Champions League trophies in 5 years, including an unprecedented 3 consecutive from 2016 to 2018. Each victory carried weight beyond sport. Ronaldo's goals shattered records. Ramos's headers became legends, and the Bernabeu echoed as the cathedral of European dominance. Barcelona had Messi, but Madrid answered with supremacy on the grandest stage. This era cemented Real Madrid not only as kings of Europe, but as the eternal reference point of ambition, resilience, and glory. When Cristiano Ronaldo departed in 2018, many predicted the empire would crumble. His absence left a void impossible to fill, and early results confirmed the fears. Coaches rotated, defeats piled, and rivals whispered that Madrid's golden age was over. Yet from the shadows, a new generation began to rise. Benzema, long in Ronaldo's shadow, transformed into a leader and Ballon d'Or winner. Young blood like Vinicius Jr., Rodrigo, and Valverde brought speed and hunger. In 2022, the impossible became reality. Dramatic comebacks against PSG, Chelsea, and Manchester City led to another Champions League triumph. It was proof that Madrid's identity transcends individuals. No matter the crisis, the club reinvents itself. By 2024, with Ancelotti's calm leadership, Madrid once again looked untouchable, a symbol that the throne of Europe, sooner or later, always returns to white hands. Real Madrid's story is not only written in trophies, but in battles that transcend football. The eternal clash with Barcelona is more than a derby. It is the reflection of Spain itself. Madrid against Catalonia, central power against independence, politics woven into every kick of the ball. El Clásico became the most watched club match in the world, a stage where pride, identity, and history collide. Beyond Spain, rivalries with Bayern Munich, Liverpool, and Juventus turned into continental sagas. Each meeting felt like chapters of a greater legend, a struggle for dominance in Europe. For millions, defeating Madrid means glory. For Madrid, each rival is simply another obstacle on their eternal march. These rivalries elevated the club into myth. They remind us that Real Madrid is not just a team, it is a mirror of nations, cultures, and the eternal fight for supremacy. Real Madrid's legacy is carved in stone, unshaken by time. From political shadows to football dynasties, the club transformed victories into mythology. No other team embodies ambition like Madrid, where every defeat is only the prelude to a greater resurrection. 13, 14, 15 European Cups, each one echoing through history as proof that this institution is more than sport. It is identity, power, and destiny. For rivals, Madrid is the unreachable standard. For fans, it is faith dressed in white. The Santiago Bernabeu is not just a stadium, it is a temple, where legends rise and history refuses to die. Real Madrid stands as the eternal benchmark, the team that redefined greatness itself. And as long as football exists, its crown as kings of Europe will remain untouchable. And if you made it this far, it means this story touched you. You felt something. That connection between football, history, and destiny, that's what this channel is all about. So now I ask you, join this community. Subscribe, because there are many more untold stories waiting for you here. If this video resonated with you, comment below the words, "I feel the history," so I know you are part of those who understand that football is more than a game. Don't forget to leave your like. It's a simple click. But it helps this story reach thousands of others who need to see it. And above all, don't stop here. The next chapter is already waiting for you. It's right there on the screen. Click and continue the journey.